Hello and welcome to Bloke on the Range, and I've got Chappie around here to do a bit of a state of the channel and a Patreon Q&A. We haven't done one of them since skiing in February.
Yeah.
Quite a long time. It's been a weird year, but first of all, we need to thank you all for watching and liking and subscribing and so on, and please, if you haven't liked and subscribed, please do it already and leave a comment, because all the engagement helps drive views and drive more subscribers, and we have reached the first big milestone of 100,000. So we're pretty chuffed with that. So we're celebrating with a little bit of Canton Neuchâtel fizz.
Far superior than champagne. Don't tell the French.
You'll have to hand your passport back in. Anyway, so hopefully this isn't going to splooge all over the table. Whoo! So, one for Chappie.
Thank you very much.
One for my long-suffering missus, who we need to thank an awful lot. She is out of shot, aside from her hand.
Yeah, don't scrimp on it.
Bit more? That good? Bit more. There we go. Once she's gone, the door gets shut. And one for me. So, many thanks to her for tolerating my stuff and nonsense for the last 4.5 years. And
well, cheers.
Cheers to you. Thanks to you.
Thank you to
for
you.
all your hard work, helping relieve some of the pressure on me. Thanks to patrons, in particular, for funding our endeavour here. It really means we can travel, we can acquire interesting GATs. Borrowing GATs is difficult in Switzerland compared to the States.
Yeah, that's the one annoying thing when people say, you know, have you tried this out? Can you get this? Probably someone's got one somewhere, but it's not easy just to borrow.
Yeah, we would have to acquire and do paperwork, or the person has to be there on the range. And sometimes this works, like the SA80 stuff, that worked. Sometimes it doesn't. But since we started on Patreon back in 2017, we've managed a video a week.
Yeah.
And the odd extra little thing, stuff and nonsense on a Sunday. We both have day jobs. We're both doing this full time. Just adjusting the fondue, priorities. I might drop down a bit in my day job, which would give me more time and mental space. Might try that for a couple of months. But we have day jobs and
families
and
as well.
Other things. So we might not be able to maintain the one main content video a week. We're going to try.
Yeah, I mean, also the fact is, obviously, as the channel has developed, we get to more and more in-depth subjects, which we can't just knock up in a day or so. It's
I mean,
needs research, and
a lot of the early stuff we did. One of the most viewed views was a little thing I knocked out in 3 minutes on the range on the way home, and it's got like 2.5–3 million views. Probably because it triggered some fanboys, but
it's always good.
Yeah. So anything involving more in depth, that takes a lot of mental energy, and we both have intellectually difficult day jobs, and it's not a case of I can work in the day job all day and then come home and then in the evening spend 2 hours doing primary research.
Yeah.
It's difficult. It requires rather more input and time than you would imagine, and the 10–20 minute video you see at the end might have had 15–20 hours go into it, spread over a long time.
Yeah.
You have to sort of grasp while the iron is hot when you're feeling it.
Absolutely. If you're in the zone, the dialogue will go easily. It'll take a couple of takes. If it's not going. I've had evenings where I've spent an entire evening doing dialogue, stopping and starting, and next day I've scrapped the lot. But then it's a good day, and then it just goes. Yeah,
and doing primary research actually is one thing if you're just relying on one book, but if you're putting two secondary book sources together, that gets more complicated if you're then, particularly if it's in German. And they're not entirely coherent between the two versions. And then, for instance, for the Swiss straight pulls, I'm sorry, I've done like one of them in the last 2 years, just to basically to try and help Matthias out with his, so that I could get the 1908-1909 trials done. And then he got the 1911 out before. Now, the Swiss 1911, not the American 1911, everyone's bugging him about. He got that out before us because I just haven't been able to do it. It's rather more complicated. I found a document dump in the Federal Archives, which just brings into question certain things we thought as well, and I've really got to go through that. I've skimmed through it once and taken basic notes, and then I need to go through and actually synthesize it all, because it's rather more complicated. So we will get there. This is a long-term project. I'm very sorry that I've not been progressing on that one as fast as I'd like.
Yeah.
We don't have any merch. This is the Merchmeister, but
Yeah.
again, same reason. There isn't any, but
There is some, but there hasn't been any more.
yeah, there's our existing stuff on Teespring, so feel free to buy that. What we thought we'd do is promote some of our friends
Yep.
who do have new and exciting merch. So first up, we've got Polar Tactical, who now have added the real one to the Operator series. We now have a Smooth Operator T-shirt that can be bought from Polar Tactical. So please buy. And Matthias, FC in Arsenal, has done Swiss rifle actions.
Yep.
With
Very nice.
his artwork, exceptionally nice. So again, link in the description below.
They have proper artists.
Matthias, who is a proper artist.
Yeah, they have, not just me with a crayon.
So sorry, there isn't any new and shiny bloke on the range stuff, but those two have stuff. I believe Ian has some stuff out as well, but those are the two that are relevant to what we focus on a lot.
Yeah.
So
I have one idea, but I probably won't be able to get it out for Christmas. But I have one idea.
So anyway, we'd had this idea that we'd do something over fondue for a long time. Finally got around to it.
Yep.
It's been an eventful year in the private lives. We've both moved house. I've moved back down to civilization from the mountains. We're about an hour apart now, whereas previously we've been 25 minutes.
Yep.
I've done a basement conversion, which, I just basically made decisions and fetched and carried, and some other guys did it. But I've had all of that on top. Work situation during lockdown was a bit scary for a bit, but then it sort of got back to normal. So my day job workload is at normal, basically.
Yeah, mine never stopped. If not, it got worse, actually. It got busier.
So, thanks to all sorts of people who've helped with the channel. Sorry, if I start naming too many names, I'll just miss people out. So if you've helped us, you know we appreciate it. Thank you very much. And we're starting to get the crusty bottom going on there. Mm-hmm. So there is a question about fondue, so we will deal with that. We will deal with what exactly this pot of stuff is when we get there. Absolute cheese heaven.
Yeah.
So most of these questions, our patrons have had a week to send them in, so this is up to date as of now. Most of them are more for me, so Chappie's got a bigger appetite than me anyway, so he's going to read them out.
I'll just eat and drink. Yammer on.
So we've got this Mauler. It's a bit sweet for my taste. I like bruter than the brutest of brutes.
And that says dry.
And that says dry. Dry is pretty sweet for me.
Yeah.
And then what's in the fondue is some chasselas, local Bernese Lake Beale area chasselas, which is
The sunny bit, yeah.
excellent. Yeah, on the sunny side of it. So,
Right, so shall we dig in? Mm-hmm. Right. So first question is from the mysterious JL. When will we see you with a Sauer 200 STR?
So this rifle is the modern rifle that's allowed in Norwegian stang skeeting, the short bursts of rapid fire stuff that I really want to do. I had a look on the 6-hour Sauer catalogues, and they don't seem to be a thing here. There's other 6-hour models that are used for Standardgewehr, so sort of Swiss target rifle equivalent. This wasn't on it. I think the answer to this is if somebody invites me up to Norway to teach me some stang and let me have a go at that, which I would love to do, really, really love to do, I'm sure I'll have a go at that. And what they're allowed to shoot is an HK G3, I think they call it AG3 up there, converted Mauser 98s, converted Norgie Crags, and this Sauer thingy. We got enough heat.
Yeah, a bit too much. Anyway. All right. Then, Thomas Gray. If you could only keep one handgun and one long gun from your collection, what would they be? Classic question.
Two answers to this. I'm going to give the practical answer and the irrespective of practicalities answer. The practical answer, given the Swiss competition programme, is the handgun would be my Hammerly SP20 sport pistol, small bore 22 sport pistol, and the rifle would be the K31 of mine that shoots the best with diopters, because I'd use that for the rifle part. If that wasn't a consideration and I could only have two, I think with handgun, if it will probably be the same, probably be the SP20, unless I had an opportunity to shoot practical, which of the ones I've got at the moment, it would be my BDA9, my double action high power. But if I bought one for it, I'd probably, I don't know, choose a modern, like 6-hour P226X5 or something like that, maybe. Don't know. Yeah. Haven't thought too much about it. And on the rifle front, my Oberland Arms H-bar heavy-barreled AR-15 rifle. That was my do-it-all rifle from Holland, because we can cheat and have conversion kits. And I have a 22 semi-auto conversion kit. You get all sorts of different conversion kits for it. I had a 762x39 piston upper I bought off a friend. He had custom made. Had that for a while. And it allows me to shoot practical or target or whatever just by changing the sights on it, really. So, slightly boring answer, perhaps.
Yeah, on my side, again, if we divide into Swiss, allowable stuff, pistol, SIG 210 was probably even 7.65 though. Mm-hmm. And I would actually stick with a WWII as a target shooting and alliness. And if we discount all that, rifle, I think I would actually keep the Manual 540.
I like that 540. I covered that 540.
It's light, handy, accurate.
It's the SP1 or M16A1 of the big 5XX
exactly
series. It's probably, from a practical perspective, it's probably the best rifle of the series.
Mm. Yeah, and it's just got tweaked for practicality and ease of maintenance. And
there's a few oddities. Certainly it handles and shoots better. In practical sense, the target shooters, that's not accurate, which it probably isn't. But they kind of did similar things to make the 550 that they did with the M16 A1 to A2. They made it heavier.
Yep.
And they made it more targety.
Oh, yes.
And less
far heavier gauge steel on the receiver pressings and all that.
It got very heavy.
And handgun, I think I'd actually stay with my MR73 manual revolver. Both staying in manual, coincidence. But yeah, because it shoots better than I do. And
it's not just egregious French bias.
No, it's just pure coincidence.
Oh, shit.
Right. I guess the question didn't say, should have maybe said, what do you own that you would keep?
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough.
All right. Then we have a question from Felicia Horobin. As an M38 Carcarno owner myself, any Carcarno videos on the horizon? Yes, I'm also an M38 owner. I'm guessing we're talking about the 7.35 version here. So once I get everything running, I've got the die set, I've got cases. Big problem I have is the bullets. So I'm going to be going to gradually size down some 308, maybe in one or two different intervals of sizing, and then see how it goes. Got the 1891 long rifle as well, that runs fine. So yeah, as soon as it's up and running, then we'll feature it on the channel.
We have a lot of backlog of stuff we bought personally and with Patreon funds.
Yep.
Quite a substantial backlog, actually, including some interesting full auto stuff. So over time, that will be filmed and fed in when we get around to it.
Right. Next, Matthew Jackson. What are the chances we could get a mad minute with the Russian Contract Winchester 1895?
Just requires me and said rifle and a supply of ammunition and some charges that work to be occupying the same time space as a range.
Yeah, and as we explained at the beginning of the video, we can't just borrow things just like that. It takes an awful lot of paperwork if the person themselves cannot be present.
Just to borrow something that just requires a contract, which that requires an acquisition permit.
Yeah.
We could just do the paperwork very quickly, send it off, just doubles up the paperwork, and it just annoys the
police. Yeah.
Whatever. Something like that requires an acquisition permit. There's 50 francs at each end, plus a criminal record declaration, which is another 20. So it's potentially 140 francs, plus any shipping costs or whatever to borrow a rifle. And also, I don't want to have other people's stuff hanging around, given that we can take quite a long time to get around to stuff.
Yeah.
We haven't been to Sion for a while because we just have not been able to get around to it. So thank you, Stephen, for continuing to propose that. We will get there again once this. I think it's probably not before the spring.
Yeah. All right, Stuart Burton. Caseless ammo has been the next big thing for about 60 years. Has its time come or already gone? 60 years? It's been around since 1841, old chap.
Oh. Are you counting paper cartridges or rocket balls?
No, paper cartridge, dizer. Put a cartridge in, fire it, nothing left in the chamber. Caseless ammo. Self-contained. But anyway, seriously.
Yeah, modern. Well, and there was also the volcanic rocket balls.
Yeah.
Where the powder charge is in a huge hollow base. Similar era, 1840s.
Yep.
It's a bit like nuclear fusion, like commercially viable nuclear fusion for generating electricity. It's been the next big thing since we were embryos.
Yep.
I don't know. I think the polymer cased stuff seems to be a bit more
realistic.
The big issue, and this comes up over and over again, is dumping heat, because the cartridge case takes an awful lot of heat out of the system because it's got quite a lot of heat capacity. Without that, you're overheating the stability of the propellant, because then you've got to have a block of propellant that is structural and holds the thing together, survives water, survives mishandling, survives long-term storage. It's just a whole raft of issues that just don't seem to have been fixed, and the designs to use it tend to be kind of complicated, and you've got the problems of extracting an unfired case or a misfire, and
all hail the holy G11.
yes, the other G11, the Kraus Space Magic G11.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So basically, more likely to get railguns.
Freaking laser beams.
Once we get batteries sorted out, yeah. There's always a problem for the next step. So, Clayton Claton. Why are modern commercial cock-on-close actions so rare?
We'll allow in the second one as well, because there's a second one in there. Partly it's what the market wants, largely what the market wants. But also there is a mechanical advantage. Sorry, the multitasking here, getting at the nice toasty bit of cheese at the bottom. You can use a heavier striker spring, giving a shorter lock time. And for a god tier shooter, that won't make any difference. But for a slightly iffy shooter whose follow through could do with a bit of improvement, it makes a difference. So less time from sear release to bang, because the striker can have a stronger spring driving it and can have less distance to travel and still strike reliably. If we take this on a slight tangent, us tangents, never.
No.
You see some cock on open actions which don't take advantage of this. Normally the ones that allow a second strike. So the Crags and the 1903 Springfield, they tend to have a sloppier striker spring to allow you to pull it back. Mauser 98 has a nice stiff striker spring. And then I think they made a mistake on the P14 and the M17 by having a cock-on open weight striker spring, but a cock-on close action, which is why they're harder to close than the Swedish 96 Mausers and Lee Enfields for that reason. So you've got a pair there that really should swap their striker springs over. But we actually filmed something last time we were in Seal on those two rifles as a comparison, which still haven't made up into a video because I wasn't quite happy with it. But what I think I'm going to do is sit down and talk about something. I want to add some things that I've sort of worked out, some experience I've had in the meantime, and I'll use the footage we had, but I'm going to do it differently. But again, getting around to it.
So, part 2.
Naughty, but we'll allow it.
Yeah. Conversely, is there a reason why BSA in its later commercial production essentially switched to using Mauser-like actions as opposed to Lee Enfield action, like it did on its commercial rifles?
So, times were different. So, early on, BSA were producing SMLEs, well, Longleys and then SMLEs, for the British government. So they had a supply of actions they could use. So they did. So they made various types of sporting rifles in various qualities, in various calibers, based around 303, necked up, normal 303, 8x50R Mannlicher. That was popular for India because it wasn't restricted. All sorts of things, shotguns. They had them, particularly in the interwar period, where the army stores were absolutely filled with largely 1918 production SMLEs. Between the wars, basically, aside from experimental stuff, there was just a trickle of military rifle production in the UK. Budget and the fact that the deep storage was absolutely stacked with zillions of frontline rifles. So BSA is still producing for the government. It's still producing for other governments' commercial contracts, the famous one being the Siamese contract, but there were other smaller ones around. And the firearms restrictions in the UK weren't too great, so they added to that by producing purpose-built sporting rifles from the ground up. Post-World War II, the world is a different place because people are transitioning to semi-auto rifles. There's huge amounts of surplus that comes on the market, like German Mauser actions, loads of number 4s. They even kept producing number 4s at the Fazakerley government-owned plant, which seems to be been a bit of a make-work project because they were dumping number 4s at sea and giving them to all and sundry.
But make more.
Yeah, I mean, they practically rearmed a good chunk of Western Europe that had been involved in the Second World War with number 4s. The Dutch got them, I think the Danes got them, the Belgians got them, the Germans got some number of them. We were just giving them to everybody and kept producing them. And it's the whole number 4 Mark II thing and the upgrade programs and blah. So if you want to make money in the arms trade after that point as a big company, if you're not producing for the government, which BSA produced L1A1s, but in terms of bolt action rifles, because the market's absolutely flooded with surplus, with perfectly good actions of various types you could get for cheap as free, practically, scrap value, it makes sense to do your own thing. And from a sporting rifle perspective, a Mauser 98 type action is much easier to machine, there's much less going on in it, it's much simpler. The BSA ones are sort of low profile with like little mounts front and back to mount a scope low, which is doing that's a much more suitable platform for mounting a scope low than a number 4 action. Fundamentally, if you're doing anything on number 4 actions, you're not making them new anymore, so you're doing it on surplus actions and you're competing with every little gunsmith who's not got enough work, so is doing it for a snip. Parker Hale went that way, and they did both actually. There's the T4, which is converted number 4 actions into various sporting and target configurations. There's the TX1200, which is Mauser 98 actions, and then we ended up with the first cadet target rifle, which rumour has it that they were on La Coruna, Spanish actions, which might explain why they had receiver rings crack. But anyway, I think your selling point has to be you're producing something new, and from a sporting context, the Mauser 98 action is longer. You can fit a greater variety of cartridges in it. You can fit high pressure cartridges in it. It's a much more suitable action for a civilian service rifle. And you're also trying to distinguish from Parker Hale, who are making sporting rifles on No. 4 actions. Yeah. So it makes a lot of sense for BSA to do that, I think. Have I tangented enough there?
I'm sure I can reflect us back onto the mainstream here. Tim K. If you were to do another bolt action challenge, would you allow the Tikka T3x Arctic as it's a commercial version of a currently issued military bolt action rifle?
Rowan in Australia is going to hate me. The answer is if we ran the same rules, no. We didn't just want an military issued rifle. We were more restricted. We wanted a standard sort of infantry combat troop issued rifle. We were very explicit. We excluded things that, say, the HBSA rules allow, because the HBSA rules allow sniper variants with their scopes off, shooting off the iron sights. So in veteran pre-1945 class, like the god tier rifle in that is a No. 4 Mark 1T with the scope off.
Yep.
They're absolute god tier, for obvious reasons, unless you believe tropes. But anyway, we wanted to make it bog standard service rifles. I mean, there's no advantage to shooting that, and you'd actually have had a major embuggerance because we had a compulsory reload in there, so that the non-god tier rifles that only take 5 or 6 rounds weren't at a disadvantage. So we enforced a compulsory reload on everybody, and you had to reload at least 5 cartridges by means of loose rounds or a charger or an en bloc clip.
Yep.
So basically, with the Tikka, you'd have to take the mag off, stuff it round by round, which is a 2-hand job, and put it back on and reacquire your position.
He would do it. He'd manage it.
It would be a stretch. I mean, I'm sure I could do it, but I'd have to rush it. But with the short sight radius, it's not an advantage anyway. Before the Bernese upped the corona restrictions, we had actually organised a civilian service rifle type match for 40 people, and unfortunately that got nixed in the end, but we'd opened that up to anything. And in fact, I was going to shoot my M16A1, I think. Forgotten now. No, I wasn't. I was going to shoot my Oberland with the target apertures. Yes. Yes, that was going to be fun. It was basically taking British civilian service rifle and working it within the limitations of what we could do on the range in tune, because we can't do rundowns, and also the limitations of Swiss shooters' experience, so changing positions with a loaded rifle. The Guntel has a very limited danger area because there's an assumption that you're not going to be pointing rifles off in odd directions, so we had to ensure that loaded rifles were not going to be pointed off in directions where, should one get loosed, it would end up in
the motorway next door.
Somewhere else. It shouldn't. So it was all going to be fixed position. You start in the shooting position, you load, you keep the muzzle within the hill the whole time, which isn't so much of a concern at Bisley, and they do rundowns with loaded but not made ready rifles and all sorts, which we couldn't do. But we'll see if we can run something similar to that next year.
Yep.
But for the minute, unfortunately, it got nixed.
Yes. Loki writes, what has been the greatest joy and the greatest challenge for you as the channel has grown?
Let you start this one.
I mean, the greatest joy has been to share the passion. Nice comments. We do videos just because you're interested. That's how we run. We're interested in whatever we're talking about, and it's nice to get comments from people who are equally enthusiastic. Also gets you in touch with an awful lot of people which you would otherwise not get access to. Not just people who are other channel runners, other creators, or high up in weapons design or whatever, but again, people that share your passion or have access to documentation which you otherwise not have access to because they're also equally nerds in the same area. And Yeah, the greatest challenge now, is I think we've sort of addressed that at the beginning, is that as the channel's progressing, we're getting to progressively complex topics.
Stuff that's outside our pre-existing knowledge base and comfort zones.
Yeah. Especially comfort zone. You think, am I saying the right thing here when we know we don't have all the sources?
Yeah. Definitely, I'd second the motion regarding interacting with people, both content creators and non-content creators. One of the great things about the internet is that it opens the world up to hyper-focused nerds like us. Well, we're not that hyper-focused in terms of a channel. Plug for another channel who's great, and you should become their patron, is the Vickers Machine Gun Association, which is a hyper-focused channel/research project, and they actually own working live full auto Vickers guns in the UK for collecting and research purposes. And it's set up as a non-profit limited company and what have you. We'll put a link to them in the description below. And one of Richard's passions is photographing and cataloguing all the Small Arms Committee minutes, because there's just a massive wealth of information that's out there. Otherwise, certainly on British service stuff, you're stuck with Skennerton and Reynolds from back in the day. And Reynolds doesn't cite his sources very well, and he certainly had access to all sorts of interesting information. I'd like to see what the document actually says, because we just got what he says, and whether he's interpreting it, which was the start of the time. And now we're more, okay, this comes from like column 2, blur, of this document. I'd really like to go down to that level. So I'm working on some stuff that's based on the contents of the minutes. Basically, I want to do a road to the No.4, how we ended up with the No.4 rifle, because there's an awful lot of tropes out there about that, should we say. A lot of misunderstanding as to how that was arrived at, and it's often presented in the books in a massively oversimplified way, and people then massively oversimplify that again themselves and make false statements inadvertently. And yeah, but I've got this whole primary research thing. Whenever I'm feeling it, I'm dipping into that, but it's a lot of primary research and a lot of PDF photographs of old documents. Dealing with crappy comments, that's the other side of the internet. That's less fun. I'm getting much better at dealing with that, but yeah. But the challenge is keeping it up as the low-hanging fruit is.
It's been used up.
Yeah, and it ends up more in depth. Plug for Athias. Athias does a podcast for his patrons. He had me on. He was very kind enough to have me on. But a recent one he did, he explained what goes into his episodes, and it's insane. Massive, massive, massive thanks to him for the work he does in explaining all these complicated things. And he's Google translating documents in various foreign languages. The number of hours he works on it is insane. And we don't come close. Let's just put it that way. You need to top up. Shall I be mother?
Yes, please. So, Christian Hannes, something.
He's a
Haynes. Sorry. Ever thought about doing a video on Edward Brodbeck? With. Doing a video, it's even better. Doing a video with Edward Brodbeck. He has a history of this. He has a history at SIG going on all the way back to 1947. Besides also being in the lead of the Sturmgewehr 90 project.
Funny you should say that, because just before the lockdown in March, Dale had set this up, and we were going to go up and talk to Herr Brodbeck.
I'm sorry.
Who is now a quite aged, elderly gentleman. And obviously with the restrictions and lockdown and his time of life, we had to cancel it, and we will hopefully be able to get onto that next year at some point. But yes, that was in fact set up in March and then couldn't happen. So
all right.
There we go.
Aria Roy. How were sights calibrated in the 19th and early 20th century service rifles? Were the trajectories calibrated from external ballistics, equations or tables, or were they verified the way to extreme ranges such as 2,000 yards.
Yes. They did both.
All of the above.
All of them. All of the above. And this is a good chance for a...
You're on a tangent again.
a bit
Feel
of
one coming.
Yes. Right. What tended to happen was that they measured empirically with tests as far as possible. If they couldn't, they then fill in with calculated data. I mean, external ballistics was pretty well known. Determining a ballistic coefficient, on the other hand, is non-trivial. So there were errors made. The big famous error being the 1903 Springfield for the model 1906 cartridge. Now, the American Expeditionary Force, when it went out to France in 1917, 1918, they were equipped with French, with French machine guns and British machine guns, depending on who they were attached to. And they were conducting barrages with mostly Hotchkiss and Vickers out to over 3,000 yards on the basis of empirically arrived at tables. Long-range machine gunnery was a big deal at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's a road junction 3,000 yards that way. From this time to this time, we're going to deny it to the enemy with a battery of Vickers.
Yep.
And they just sit there and chug 250 round bursts at it, rendering it not a great place to be. Now, towards the end of the war, when the model 1917 Brownings were issued, the machine gunners found that they shot really short at long range, and they couldn't get anywhere near the same effective range. And what had happened was they hadn't been able to get good empirical data for the longer ranges, so they calculated it, and they seem to have overestimated the ballistic coefficient. So that 150 odd grain flat base bullet didn't carry as far as they thought it would. Which leads into the whole 30M1 in the 1920s, and they actually did tests with GP11 bullets in 3006 cases, so there's a Swiss connection there as well. That made it through the system. Then later they discovered that overshot the danger areas on a lot of ranges, so then they ended up with the 30M2 load, which more or less replicates the original 3006 load, and they're back at square one. And interestingly, in the Second World War, they're mostly shooting the M2 ball out of the water-cooled machine guns rather than the M1 ball for some reason. Whereas the Brits had gone the other way and had 303 Mark 8Z, which had a streamlined bullet based on GP11. It's not quite the same, but they started from there. Shooting out even further. They got range tables out. Another good 1,000+ yards. I don't want to say off the top of my head because I can't remember the exact figure. So whatever figure I come out with, it's probably wrong, so I won't. You can look it up on the Vickers Machine Gun Association website, find a manual from the World War II era. But yes, that was tangent. Back at the plot was calculating.
Calculating.
Yeah. Second tangent. The sighting issues on the Longlys were another thing. I mean, you get variation from manufacturer to manufacturer, and it was an era where it's a pre-World War I era where they were still thinking of mass rifle fire at extreme distances, at long distances. But you end up with a difference from manufacturer to manufacturer. You end up with climatic differences, and in the Small Arms Committee minutes, there's a suggestion of issuing recalibrated sights for different zones of operation. Climate.
Highly practical.
Yeah, and which basically this is not practical at all. And in any case, as the rifles wear, they tend to shoot shorter anyway. As the barrel gets a little bit wider, you get a bit less pressure, a bit less muzzle velocity. And they just said no, it's just completely impractical. And it turns out also that the sighting issues with the Longlys, it wasn't a grouping capacity issue. It was a missighting issue because there was no specification for testing the sighting of completed rifles. They'd test the grouping capacity of the action and barrel, but they wouldn't do it with completed rifles until later. So they calculated the position of the front sight and they calculated everything. And of course, there's variation in tolerance from rifle to rifle, and it's an asymmetric locking system. So if one of the lugs is bearing a bit more than the other, laterally it'll be a bit off anyway. And this was solved by having a set of adjustable front sights of different heights and individually testing each rifle. So the second tangent. Done. Moving swiftly.
Andrew Grayson, what are the best diopter sights for a Lee Enfield No.4 that do not require gunsmithing?
Parker Hale 5C. You can find them on eBay sometimes.
Right.
Haven't been made for ages. Modern stuff that doesn't require gunsmithing. Does anyone even make one? Do Redfield make one? I don't know. Anyway, Parker Hale 5C.
Right. Marvin J. Fritz. What did the German army consider important when fitting military stock to the 98K?
So, it's a very 19th century way of stocking up. That, okay, you've got the stepped barrel, which means that as the barrel expands with respect to the wood, you've got it's all parallel sections with steps. So, as it gets longer, it doesn't push the wood down and cause deviation due to that. But it's in contact. It's supposed to be in full contact. So once the wood settles, or gets warm on one side, or warps a bit over time, it puts pressure. Contrary to popular belief, they're not that accurate on average. The number of angry wearaboos I've had, where all I've done is reported the Germans' own figures, and the amount of cope has been quite substantial. But this is part of the reason why in military configuration they don't actually shoot that well. This is the stocking. Basically, they didn't benefit from what Springfield did with the having the barrel free between the receiver or the reinforce and a muzzle bearing, and then having up pressure at the muzzle bearing. They're fully carefully hand fitted with skilled people with sandpaper, and it's a terribly labour intensive process. During World War II, as a way to try and simplify this and solve some of the problem areas, they would gently relieve certain areas, so they machine them out. So then those areas didn't have to be hand fitted, but it was still skilled labour. I mean, stocking up, aside from barrel quality, stocking up is the big issue with military rifle accuracy. And if they shot better free floated, they'd be free floated, because then it simplifies that massively. And there's an awful lot of wartime No.4 rifles that were set up like that, free floated. I believe they didn't relax the accuracy requirement for them, but they did a test post-war, and I talked about this in a video already, where they tested various manners of stocking up, and the free floats were not as good. Simply, they needed for top performance, they need the up pressure or a centre bedding.
There's another rifle that shouldn't be free floated. I just can't remember what its name is.
Which one? Oh, something French?
No, something Swiss that people insist on trying to do.
Yes.
I'll put my finger on it. Something ending in a 1.
And a 1?
Yeah.
No. K31.
Ah, that's the one.
It's another one that that every so often you see on a forum someone has brought their expensive K31 home, and the first thing they've done is hack out the muzzle bearing because it must be free floated, and at which point you've actually only got the rifle sitting on 2 points, because it's when I finally get around to the K31 in the Swiss Straight Pull series, I'll take one apart and show it. But basically it's a 3-point bedding. The No.4 bedding is a bit more complicated with the contact points around the action. There's more going on there, and still requires a bit of hand fitting, even if you're doing the wartime crappy free float. But at least you don't have to fiddle around with the muzzle bearing, which is why they did it. And then if the wartime timber warps, then it doesn't have as much of an effect, or shouldn't have any effect until it gets so bad it bears.
Right. Steve Clancy. I've got a double question here, I didn't realise. What is your fondue recipe for tonight? Packet.
It's a packet of moitié with the chafis bilese chasselas and some garlic.
Yeah.
And that's it. And some bit of cornstarch and kirsch, so cherry schnapps. And we also have a little dunking shot glass, and we've been occasionally dunking our bread in before putting it in. That is it. There's another question further down, which was our favourite, and this is a pretty classic one. There's loads of secret recipes. Everyone's got their own little secret recipe.
Yeah.
But most people buy it in a packet in the supermarket and thought I was really odd when they saw me make one from scratch.
Why?
Which I still do, but only out of season when we can't get the packets.
Yeah.
But you can go to a petrol station and buy a pot of.
I remember as a student, a very good friend of mine, student, also was Swiss, and we would get grated packets shipped from Switzerland to our student abodes.
Mm-hmm.
But that was grated stuff,
Yeah.
which you can also get. Yeah, mostly it's
You either got stuff you add wine to or stuff that has the wine in it already. And the expensive stuff that has the wine in it already is fine. The cheap, like Gerber stuff is pretty gash.
That's horrible.
To be honest. Yeah, I want to quickly do practical impact of revised Swiss gun legislation. Actually, ultimately, it wasn't too bad. The one plus point is that down conversions from full auto are now at the same level as factory semi-autos. So that's good.
Yeah.
The new intermediate permit is not that big of an embuggerance.
No.
I mean, it's certainly not in Canton Bern. In some cantons, if you want something that is shortenable to under 60 centimetres, they've insisted that you already have a certain number of guns to be considered a collector, but that varies from canton to canton.
Yeah.
Touch wood, they've really minimised the embuggerance level. It could have gone, I mean, the first draft of what was going on, it could have been an awful lot worse. The permit costs the same.
Yep, that's good.
If you want the shortenable stuff, you have to actually have a basic safe now, which you didn't before. So the stupid thing is, you could buy all sorts of AR-15s as a sport shooter and not have to declare yourself a collector, so not actually have to have a safe.
Yeah.
But if you declare yourself a collector because you want short stuff or you want full auto, you have to put everything in a safe that falls under the new categories, even if you bought it as a sport shooter. You've declared it, you're just a collector for everything, aren't you?
Yeah. I've got the safes anyway, and I've locked everything up, so no difference.
I wanted to be in both systems because as a sport shooter, you have to provide evidence of club membership or shooting it 5 times in 5 years, twice. I just wanted to just get in that system and done as well, so I bought one as a sport shooter. And the others, it doesn't really matter now. It makes no difference which box I tick unless it's shortenable under 60 centimetres, when I have to tick the collector box.
Yeah. Right. Frank Connor. Was the M1917/3 rifle superior to the SMLE, as we Americans often think? And if so, why was it not adopted in place of the .4? Not to speak ill of the .4, of course.
Because it's not. I mean, it makes a better marksman's rifle and better sniper rifle, but as a general infantry rifle, it's not. I mean, they weren't completely stupid. They might have done some strange things over the years, particularly with the SA-80, but they weren't completely stupid. The P14 was an emergency measure, and had it been a better general infantry combat rifle, they'd have put it in the front lines as such. Because why would you keep that back for training if it's a better rifle? It's something I want to do a bit more looking at in the future, but it's longer, it's heavier, it's worse balance, it's difficult to carry at the trail because it's got too much target rifle in it. In the textbook of small arms 1929, it's basically a footnote, and they note that it was difficult to keep clean in the field. There's lots of inside corners and stuff on it, not to mention the locking recesses that are not very accessible. On an SMLE, there's like no difficult to clean features around the receiver ring, and the locking recesses are easy to get at behind. The 10 round magazine is a thing, even if your official doctrine is loading 5, because it means that you can top up with 5. If you've got 5 rounds or less in the magazine and you've got charges that are 5 rounds, you can top up.
As we've shown in our
running
gun.
Great video that we had running up and down in Derbyshire.
Yep.
It is a big advantage, and then between the wars they could have picked up development from anything they wanted, either of them. They could have gone in a completely new direction. But what they did was they revisited a pre-war aperture sight experiment and then it just sort of snowballed. And that's what's interesting, because it's presented in the books as if it was like sort of discrete decision driven, and it wasn't. Going through the Small Arms Committee minutes, you realise that it's just like there's a note of, there's some like, we got some budget, and there's this like thing we were doing with aperture sights, and can we do that with a budget? Like, all right then. And then we end up with the SMLE Mark 5, and then that ends up developed into the No. 1 Mark 6, which then gets developed into the troop trials No. 4s in the early 30s, and then the project is shelved with the decision that in the case of war in Europe, this is the rifle we're putting into production, because it's frankly it's better than both. You've got all the advantages of the SMLE with better sights that are on either, and the accuracy of a P14, provided it's stocked up correctly. A lot of the US tropes seem to be people who've bought bucket grade SMLEs and No. 4s for $12.50 back in the 60s, and then have bubbered them in various ways, done horrible things to them that involve fixing problems that aren't problems, or setting back barrels, or basically fixing supposed problems and causing actual problems.
Which is a problem which is going to get worse, because, of course, new generation collectors will then have access to those, which have been ragged.
There was some video I saw of someone restoring a Sporterized No. 4, and he put it back together, and he's missing parts.
Oops.
He's like, he just bought,
we've all been there. Don't need that.
he bought a stock, a fore-end, and just bolted it on. And he's missing the bushing, and he's missing the spring washer.
Oops.
And it's like it's not an AR-15 where you bolt stuff together. There's still, the No. 4 has a lot less gunsmithing work in it than an SMLE. Far less. And the stocking up is far simpler. But it's still, to get good performance out of it, it still needs to be stocked up correctly. Because if you've got the front sight protector bearing on the end of the handguard or the fore end, it won't shoot straight. If you've got pressure being exerted in some odd direction, it almost certainly won't shoot straight. Occasionally you come across one that by right shouldn't shoot straight and does, and one that by right should and shouldn't.
There's always those. Yep.
There's always those. You get that in any platform.
Action, yeah.
But rifles of this era aren't built in the way that these days you can go and order all the critical parts of an AR-15 from various manufacturers, and they're all sufficiently well toleranced that you can literally just bolt them all together.
Yep.
And get a perfectly good rifle. It's not the case with anything
back in those days, yeah.
Of that era.
Right, Timothy Conklin. How many languages and dialects do each of you and your respective families speak? And how and when did you learn them? Ooh. Shall I start then?
Yeah, but if you make me subtitle, I will hit you.
No,
So,
I'll be nice. Personally, I speak French, English, German, Bernese dialect when I get into it, and I can still scrape together some Dutch.
2/3 of a bottle of wine, and I'm sure your Dutch will be all right.
I'm sure it'll be fine. It's the same. And pretty much my family, the kids are the same. They can't speak Dutch anymore. They've forgotten. Well, my daughter was too young. My son used to speak Dutch. He's replaced that now with German. My wife speaks Bernese and still retains her Dutch, but has never learned official German.
Which causes great befuddlement.
Yes, causes great befuddlement. Why don't you speak German? But you can speak Bernese. Yeah,
it's easier.
So, especially it's relatively close to Dutch in terms of pronunciation and certain words. So
some words are identical, almost identical between Dutch and Bernese.
So it makes sense.
Me, it's basically the same. You didn't say where you learned them.
Oh,
he
where?
is French.
Yeah, I am French. Basically, I grew up from the age of 6 in the UK, hence why I speak like I do. And back in the day, I spoke a bit like this because I was in, sort of South London.
South London, innit?
And now I've gone posh. And German I actually learnt in England, because back in the day, when you learnt a foreign language at school, it was French or German. I've already got the French, so I was forced to learn German.
Tant pis pour toi.
Tant pis pour moi.
But it's worked out rather well in the end.
Yeah,
hasn't it?
in the end, it couldn't have worked out better. So, Dutch was just learnt by immersion. Best way to do it.
So I have the same package, but for different reasons.
Acquired differently.
Yes, obviously. I am British, which is why I speak English without an accent. If you think I have an accent, it's because you have an accent.
Dangerous
French
waters.
I learnt at school. It was the thing. It was the main foreign language that everybody had to learn. Did my GCSE in that a year early, and did Japanese for a year, of which I retained like 2 set phrases, which is just forget it, non-existent. Yeah. And then I did a year of German before switching to Spanish, but that was practically nothing. Don't retain really any Spanish. And then at university, once I decided I really wanted to get out of the UK, I got my French back up on my own and did a little German course because I'd been starting to come to Switzerland for shooting as well. So a bit of German for that was handy. And then when I went for an interview for a job in Holland, we both worked at the same large employer in the Netherlands, but we were required to be trilingual, be able to work in English, French and German to a certain degree. And I just had an amazing German day, and I have no idea where I pulled that out of, but it's worked out rather well overall. But French has always been my second language of those. Dutch, again, learnt by immersion. Joined a shooting club in the Netherlands and was there 1, 2, sometimes even 3 times a week. And after I'd been there for a year, they said, right, now you talk Dutch. Don't mind how bad it is, but talk Dutch. And learning Dutch in the Netherlands, a lot of people who move there never bother to do it. Anglophones never bother to do it because you can get away with English the whole time. The Dutch generally love speaking English. And the biggest challenge is to stop them immediately switching to English.
No, carry on.
Yeah, so you had to get very good at pronouncing the sort of standard things in shops.
Yeah, so they wouldn't spot it straight away.
Yeah. But the TV, except for kids, it's all subtitled rather than dubbed.
Cinema's the same.
Unlike here. So it's great because you can sit there listening to it in English and reading it in Dutch. And another trick for this sort of thing, once you've got good enough to read it reasonably well at least, is to switch the Dutch subtitles on the TV and watch Dutch language programs. Get it coming in both ways, as it were. And we both got pretty good at Dutch by the end.
Yeah.
To the point where both of us could be mistaken as native speakers by people not from the region.
We're from somewhere in the Netherlands, but
people in the region we lived could tell.
yeah.
People from other regions couldn't. And then learning Swiss German here, and I didn't want to be one of those foreigners that speaks High German all the time. And frankly, Bernese is easier, which really confuses people sometimes. But most of the learning materials is intended for native German speakers to be able to understand dialect. There's very little for getting people to speak it because there's an assumption that you're a German speaker and you can just speak German. But you need to be able to understand it because it's not immediately mutually intelligible with High German.
No.
It takes a bit of getting your ear into. But a lot of it is just vowel sounds changing. But there's some different grammar and stuff as well. The future tense is formulated totally differently. We should probably do a random off-topic video on this at some point.
Perhaps, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, I think that's probably enough on an off-topic thing.
I also have a smattering grounding of Italian as well, which I would really like to expand on, but we'll see. Time again. So, next, Douglas Nelson. You've explained the organisation of the Swiss Army, Aufzug, Landwehr, Landsturm. I'm curious about the officer corps. How are they promoted from the ranks? Are they promoted from the ranks? Is there a military academy like Sandhurst or West Point? Do officers serve full-time or part-time like the enlisted ranks? Now, luckily, someone far more qualified than us has answered this. Thank you to Samuel Pasha, who is, I'm guessing, active. You know?
Don't know.
No. Are you active? Anyway, many thanks for this summary. He said, I can answer this. Firstly, the army isn't organised like this anymore.
There's only the Auszug now.
This from 1995. And the typical soldier now does the following. We have boot camp for 140 days. Then we have repetition course, 120 days or 7 times 3 weeks, once a year.
So that's 3 weeks, once a year.
Yep. And you know, because when I go through Burn Station, there's stronger than 90 barrels sticking out of every rucksack and tripping you up and everything. And then you spend some time in the reserve with no active service.
It's usually over about 12 years, spread over about 12 years. And you can serve all your days in one go. It's called a Durchdiener, a through server, someone who does it all in one go. Mm-hmm. And there are professionals. The training staff are often professionals.
Yes, it depends on the leniency of your employer to let you go.
I think the idea if you're a Durchdiener is that you do it as like a gap period. You do it full time.
Yeah, and going back for the officers, they are promoted from the ranks. So you will do your time as a private, then NCO, and then officer school. And it takes a total of 430 days for a recruit to proceed to second lieutenant. Lieutenant.
Just given away that you're not English by birth.
Lieutenant.
Yes, indeed.
There's no F in it.
English spelling, man.
There should be a GH at least.
So, so there's no Sandhurst type thing. So,
yeah. Thank you. We would have been lost without that.
Yeah, we had to look it up.
So, Joshua Canner. Do you know of any reviews by Royal Marine Commandos, of American kit and weapons as they used early in the Korean War? M1 rifles, M1 carbines, BARs, M3s, SMGs, etc., and what they thought of them compared to their usual standard British kit and weapons?
Now, I've not read much on this. Read a little bit, and basically, the Royal Marines were attached to the Americans and were equipped as Americans and sort of retrained in American doctrine. And the one comment on weapons and kit that came out was they didn't like not having brain guns because the BAR is an automatic rifle, it's not a light machine gun, and the Bren is a proper light machine gun.
Yeah, but it's far too accurate.
Korea's a little bit out of my period of interest, and I just happened upon something that someone had posted somewhere and read it through, and that was what I took away from that. But fundamentally, with the World War II and Korea era things, if you could have a mix of M1 Garens, Bren guns, M1 carbines, and actually the grease guns, not bad at all, actually.
Yep.
45 ACP's a bit of a silly cartridge for an SMG, but it was their pistol cartridge, so what are you going to do? What's amazing with the M3s is that the first shot goes exactly where it's pointed, and then the rest are... It's... We got to shoot one on a paper target.
Popped my M3
Cherry.
cherry.
It wasn't the first time. It was the first time I'd shot one on paper, not just into the sand.
And the cocking lever just amuses me.
Yeah, well, they quite rightly got rid of that and just put a finger
it's just fantastic.
hole. But yeah, fundamentally, M1 rifles are far better than any bolt action. M1 carbines as an alternative to a revolver, definitely.
Yeah.
BARs, M3s compared to a Mark II or Mark III Sten are better in 9mm. Thompsons by then weren't such a big thing, but they're big boat anchors with a huge length of pull. They're really very strange things.
Of their era, yeah.
Yeah.
So, Bryce D. Going back to fondue. What is your preferred wine and fondue combination?
Well, the wine has to be Chasselas. It has to be a Chasselas. I don't really care where.
Yeah. And the fondue, well, if I was making it myself, I'd have it with a bit something a bit more salty in there.
For a while, when I was making it from scratch, I'd put an equal amount of mature Gruyere, young Emmental, and then some mature
Appenzeller.
Appenzeller.
Yeah, Appenzeller is the one that's not usually known outside of Switzerland.
Yeah, and that was amazing. For a while, I went over the top and had that, but had cave ripened Emmental in it as well.
Stuff that makes your gums tingle.
Yeah, you start picking up Morse numbers stations from North Korea or somewhere, and you back then your fillings. It's,
yeah.
But mostly they're all good. I mean, if you try to do it with like cheddar and Stilton or something, it would be absolutely horrible.
Yeah, I mean those don't melt anyway.
Yeah,
they just separate.
There's certain base cheeses, basically Gruyere and Emmental.
Yeah, Vacherin.
This one was moitié-moitié, which is Gruyere and Vacherin Free Bourgeois.
Mm-hmm.
You got fondue Neuchâtelois, which is 50-50 Gruyere and Emmental. And there's all these fake regional variations that the Swiss Cheese Association made up back in the day, and they sort of they created this sort of synthetic regional tradition.
And then you get also variations on the alcohol. It could be wine, it could be beer.
I once made an error and used Kirsch instead of wine.
Ooh,
it was terrible. It was one of those days. I'd had a long day at work. I got home.
Wine, no.
And I picked up the wrong bottle. And I couldn't work out why the fondue was terrible.
Yeah.
And then
you can use if you're doing it for kids, if you're concerned, the alcohol.
Well, the alcohol evaporates off.
Exactly, but you can use apple juice. That's a good substitute for kids. Makes it a bit sweeter, of course. But, and then people chuck all sorts. Very common one is dried mushrooms,
nutmeg,
and then there's a little spice issue. So from then, I mean, there are genuine recipe books with hundreds of these variations.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got Grossi's special mix and all that. Yep.
But most people make it out of a packet.
So next, Samuel Pasha is back. Now he's allowed his own genuine question. If I remember correctly, you originally supposed to contribute. I'm going to start this again. If I remember correctly, you were originally supposed to contribute to the World War II channel, but you finally renounced. Why is that? And could we hope for some more World War II content about Switzerland?
Okay, I have explained this before, and Ian and Carl did a specific little video explaining why they renounced and we renounced for the same reasons. Basically, the organisers promised a lot initially, things like support, and then it was just complete radio silence. Couldn't get anything out of them. It just turned into an organisational disaster. I mean, if you supported their Kickstarter, if you think of the amount of time it took to get the patches, the very basic stuff, it was like a year and a half or something. It was just not going to happen, and everyone except one or two did that, and I was on a bit of a roll of biting off more than I could chew at the time anyway. Actually, at the same time, I'd volunteered to go on the management committee for the restaurant over the road from where I lived before I moved. I'd done my usual trick of that, and we just couldn't get any straight answers or firm commitments, and it just was clear it wasn't going anywhere as the planned multi-channel collaboration. It wasn't feasible, and I can't share what went on in the email exchanges behind the scenes, but it was quite fun.
And now thinking back, how much time our own channel takes now.
Yes, I mean, another difference is that my workload in the day job back then wasn't as great.
Mm.
So I was thinking I could take on this stuff, and then that went up. And content, World War II content about Switzerland, yes. In fact, coming up, which you will already know. I don't know what level patron you are, but $5 patrons have already had access to something I've done in World War I Switzerland. Again, it's a long-term project that I'm just going to take piecemeal when I've got the time and energy for it. I want to tell more about the Switzerland in World War II story because most of what people have heard is complete 90s revisionist BS. And I would have actually sworn, except it's a pain to find this point and swear bleep it. So, yes, it's the shakedown era, 90s revisionist propaganda is what most people retain about Switzerland in World War II. So people think all sorts of very, very strange things. But to really tell it in detail, we need to tell the story of World War One. And that's kind of started with this thing I did up on WWII. It's a two-parter. It's coming up. In fact, it's the first one, or both of them will probably have gone out before this, maybe. I don't know. No, I'll probably launch this one earlier. Yeah. We can't understand World War II properly in full context without understanding World War One. You can't understand Guison without understanding Villa. So we've got to go back to the situation, and I want to get through at least a good number of the juicy bits. And we had a plan for about 3 years to go up to kilometre 0, which is where the Western Front hit the Swiss border at the Largue up in the Jura.
Someday.
And we had this plan that we were going to go up there and stay in some small hotel on the French side and do like Professor Chapshard Holmes war walks because there's a whole load of interesting stuff that goes on there. Overall, it's a dull area of the Western Front, but because of the geopolitics of it and the fact that for us Anglos, what went on in the south is largely overlooked, or in your textbook, it's just like, oh yeah, and the French advanced on Mulhausen, depending on which side of the fence you're on. And that's like it. But while us Anglos know all about the right hook through Belgium and the race to the sea and the Battle of the Marne and all of that, what happened in the north, it's forgotten that the French did the opposite underneath. With less success, they didn't get as far. But it was a mutual funk thing that went on at the start of August 1914, and that bottom one has been hidden. Partly it's a bit of Victor's writing the history. I think it's why it was a big sticking point at Versailles of getting the Germans to admit guilt for the war when they felt it was mutual to a certain degree. I'm massively oversimplifying, but they think there was a certain mutuality in there because the French have been itching to get
for a rematch
to get an Alsace and Lorraine back, which they'd lost during the Franco-Prussian War in 1870. And then there's a whole thing about the Bourbakis. We should do the Bourbakis.
Bourbaki would be interesting as well. Yeah.
There's a memorial around the back of one of my clients at work to Bourbakis.
Okay. There's the big famous wall painting which is now in Lucerne, which is worth a view. Don't think we'd be able to film in there, but
no. But we should probably.
It's an interesting history. Yeah.
Probably between the two of us, we should do the Bourbakis because it's convenient for me to go to the memorial because it's like near where I park my car when I'm in the office. So we could do that, and we could go up. It's not that far from here where they cross the border. It's about an hour, I guess.
Yeah.
So we can do all that, but again, it's all planning and research stuff that takes an awful lot of time and gets attacked piecemeal, basically. But in terms of kilometre 0, we want to do more of the geopolitical situation. We want to do Villa. We want to do the 2 major acts incompatible with neutrality, one of which most people have heard of but won't have realised was an act incompatible with neutrality, which was putting Lenin on the sealed train. And the other one was the Colonel's Affair, which involved decoding Russian diplomatic signals traffic and sending it to the Central Powers. It was very interesting Swiss TV documentary they did on that, but almost unknown outside of Switzerland. But you can't understand the World War II situation without understanding all of this first.
So we'll get there. Right, Aaron Hunt, do you have any good recommendations on English books on Swiss military guns? No.
Well, how old am I? 40. When am I going to retire? No, I'm not quite 40.
Never.
Probably not. Right, wait about 25 or 30 years till we've retired, and then we'll write one. Probably.
Yeah.
There aren't.
Sadly, there are none. History, there's a bit. But actual guns, no.
No, there aren't that many good books anyway, and they're both in German. There's two. There's the Gradzug book that's out of print, and there's Granacher, which is a nightmare the way he's presented the information. But that's had its production run, I think, is out of print as well. And they go for about 250 francs each.
Yeah. Right, so John S. Wren, 41 Swiss ammo was sold in the US from as early as 1880, but the Vetterli was still in service then. What was all this ammo getting stuffed into? Interesting question.
Was it?
The question is, was it from the 1880? Because that's
very early.
Very early, the Vetterlis. If we're talking about, well, even late 1880s, the Vetterlis are still in service. The Peabodys would still be in service with artillery.
And the Milbank Amslers.
Milbank Amslers, perhaps, but I'm not aware that they would have been dumped quite then. The Vetterlis were all dumped later, which explains why there's loads in the US, also loads of sporters, and why Winchester UMC made it up until the 40s or 50s. But that early...
I'm not sure. What Chappie was thinking of was whether there was a significant enough Schutzen style standing, appurtenances.
I know there was a thing back in those days, but I can't imagine that there would have been enough volume of specifically chambered for Swiss cartridge.
I mean, it'd be lighter than the American cartridges.
Yeah.
Possibly more suitable, but
target.
But I can't think of sort of significant numbers of American
needing a production
rifles out there. So I honestly don't know. But I mean, our first reflex was to be sceptical about the date of 1880, but we thought we could expand on that with there's the whole Milbank Amsler conversions of 1851 and other 10.4, 10.5 millimeter muzzle loaders to Tabatier, forward hinge Tabatier. You've done a couple of videos
on those, yeah. So yeah, that's because they would have been in service up until the units concerned had them replaced by Vetterlis. So,
and the Vetterlis seem to have been, judging by the privatisation dates on 1889s. I think the earliest one we're up to now is 1906. So there will still have been Vetterlis in Landsturm until about then, because in the Swiss system, a particular rifle type doesn't start to leave the system until it's permeated through the system and is no longer being recycled through it. If that makes sense. It's complicated. There's a lot of oversimplification going on there. There are very, very, very few periods where a soldier was likely to leave the service and get to keep the rifle he carried in his recruit school. Very few periods. I mean, basically, if he did it with an 1889, he likely will have done. If he did it with a K31, he likely will have done. Or with a K11 after the introduction of the K31, because the long 1911 rifles were taken off people when they transitioned from the Landwehr to the Landsturm and were replaced with 1889s, and they were just recycled through. They actually only produced the long 1911 rifles into conversions in a relatively short time frame. That's something I need to get all down for the next instalment of the Straight Pull series.
Right, so that is a bit of a mystery. Vincent Brouillard, or Vincent Brouillard.
He's a Québécois.
Okay, Vincent Brouillard. Is there an old military rifle that deserves more love and appreciation than it already has? Basically, is there a good military gun that is underappreciated from any era? I hope you're going to have enough spirit during Q&A. Not doing too badly. Aussi, salutations d'une province francophone de l'autre bord de l'Atlantique. Santé. Au Québécois. The only one I could think of was the Carcarno series.
But this is a damning with faint praise.
Yeah, exactly, because it's not as bad as people make out. It's it shoots well enough for what it's supposed to do. They don't spontaneously blow up. This is the Carcarnos, not the Vetterli Carcarnos.
Yeah, or the 8mm, the 8mm Mauser Carcarnos.
Yeah. So the 6.5s and the 7.35s, they're fine. Bad rep comes from people not reloading properly, basically.
Yeah, loading Swedish diameter bullets in. And it's like not all 6.5s are equal.
Exactly.
The Italian one's a little fatter.
Yeah, and the 7.35 is just a pain. Unless you're in the US now, thanks to Steinel, which actually produced proper diameter bullets, but can't get them here yet.
I've been talking to Steinel about getting 303 cases made up with a proper rim radius, according to original drawings. Haven't heard back from them for a while, but if you would like rim jam proof 303 ammo, new production,
Get onto Steinel.
get on to Steinel and say, hey, I hear Bloke of the Range has been talking to you about getting properly radiused 303 cases. So please, because I want to buy it. I want to get it imported over here, even if I have to order 10,000. If it's a decent approximation of Mark 7Z, even if the bullet's not quite right, I would just buy 10,000, just straight off, to have.
Do you have any other candidates?
Well, the thing is that there aren't that many obscure rifles of any quality, really. There aren't that many obscure rifles at all. There's obscure minor variants because there were only so many rifle-producing, rifle-designing nations.
Yeah.
And smaller countries either bought, or if they were under the British wing, they'd likely have bought or been given various Lee Enfield variants or P14s because they were the second choice rifles, so they got given out to other countries, such as just after World War One, Lithuania, at least possibly some of the other Baltics got P14s because we're going to keep our frontline rifles and give out the second line rifles that we'd otherwise be retaining for home service and training. Or you could go to Mauser and buy, or you could go to Mauser and say,
Make me this.
export restrictions. Why don't you come and set us up a factory?
Yep.
That was a common one. And then you got OVG, otherwise known in the Anglosphere as OEWG.
Yep.
But we're twats, we're going to say
It's
OVG. It's OVG. And what else? I mean, the French didn't produce commercially. They give stuff to their
They'd give up,
colonies.
and also like Poland, for example. They
And,
re-equip
their
them.
friends.
But they didn't produce variants for anybody. They just
Yeah.
gave what was there.
You could go to various American manufacturers and say, make us this, which is why you end up with American-made Mosins. And they made some other stuff during World War One as well, didn't they?
Who? US?
Remington and things.
Remington. I mean, they made World War One, where they made some Berthier badly.
I mean, for the Brits, you've got the whole P14 program being made by the two Remington plants in Winchester on a commercial basis. World War Two, you've got Savage making No. 4 Mark 1s and then Mark 1 stars initially on a commercial basis, and then after Uncle Sam became the customer and they were Lend-Lease. There's just not that many outside of the big...
Sort of standalone, yeah, big nations, sort of big
Yeah.
providers.
I mean, even when the Chinese go and do something on their own, they're like Gewehr 88 variants.
But that stays, yeah.
So, other than that, I mean, one day, tangent. I saw someone did a grid of Bond films, overhated, overrated, and things.
Yeah.
And things like that. They've done it in a 2D graph, and there's a certain amount of overhate. I mean, certainly in the US, that there's a lot of hate on the Commonwealth stuff for reasons that confuse us Commonwealth types who actually use the things. And there's a lot of overrating because wearaboos. But yeah, I mean, all the god tier stuff in terms of military bolt actions, the short rifles with the turn-down bolt handle and a means of rapid reloading. They're all well known. And everything else is deficient in some way because it's either a long rifle or a
sticky out bolt handle,
or sticky out bolt handles just say no, or it doesn't have a charger or on-block clip or something like that. So,
all right, Luke Telling, you have covered squad deployment and tactics in the past, namely about the priority of Bren guns and MG42 during World War II. Can you do the same with Swiss military tactics and weapons deployment during the wars and the Cold War?
Yes, I just need the manuals, and I need to talk to some reenactors. I would like to go out to a reenactor thing and show the Second World War era LMG-25 based tactics. That'd be kind of cool. In fact, a friend of the channel who's helped us a lot, Phil, he was an MG51 gunner, post-Cold War. But we're going to do some stuff talking with him about how that was used.
Right, coming on to the last three. Edmund Griffith Jones, discounting the actual practicality for a second, because we can. Which, in your humble opinion, is the coolest pattern of webbing you've come across? Which has the nerd factor that out-nerds the rest? And why is pattern 44 already, but for the sake of the question, British kit is banned? Unless it's the stuff we sold to Iraq and got it back once we'd shot its new user.
Oh man. If I can just unban the British stuff for a minute.
No, it says.
The Pan 25 limited issue stuff, I'm ignoring him, which is quite cool. It's almost pattern 37, but it's kind of rifleman focused still because it's pre-Bren gun. Limited issue, I think the RAF had it and stuff. It turns up in films randomly. Occasionally it's like 3 cartridge pockets on each side, kind of like the post-war Italian stuff. Modern stuff, I was racking my brains on this, and again it falls out of my main period of expertise, but there's all sorts of kind of cool FAL rigs out there, some Rhodesian and some European ones, sort of chest rigs, they're kind of cool. Yeah, I mean, I'm the kit monster out of the two of us, but I'm not that much into
smell it from here.
Into the modern stuff. Yeah, there's quite a lot of syrup over there. Yeah, I think the British stuff's. You got to. I mean, you got to focus a bit on what interests you here, because there's just so much and so much variation. Some of the South African chest rigs, when they came on the market in the UK for about £25 a pop, they were quite alley at the time, and people would get away with wearing them in the army or in the territorial army. They were kind of cool, like Galil mag pouches all over the place, and huge water bottle pouches because it's Africa. They were quite cool. I hope that answers well enough. Sorry if it doesn't.
Right, then we have Michael Odinstov Trub. Sorry, excuse me. L1A1 for 100 and 200 distance.
300.
100 and 300 distance X-Ordnance shooting competitions. Worth it? Question mark. And what to worry about?
Wouldn't be my first choice. I mean, I've got one that is a factory refurb and shoots very well indeed. The one I had in Holland wasn't a factory refurb and was okay. But in terms of, I mean, it was good enough, more than good enough for practical matches. I actually shot my IPSC rifle qualification course with it back in the Netherlands. A good one can hold its own, but there's better rifles out there, and if budget's not an option, find out if they'll allow Knights Arms SR25s or various AR10s or national match AR15s with heavy barrels and free float tubes, and for that kind of thing, just get the most accurate, inherently accurate rifle you can afford, and that you get on with ergonomically. I mean, I think in a 300 metre competition, I would shoot my M16A1, which is factory new, aside from what I've put through it, against my L1A1. And what to look for is looseness.
If it wobbles.
If it wobbles.
It shouldn't.
The amount of play between the two halves of the receiver, there will always be a little bit of play, but it should be minimal. It shouldn't go chuck, 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 chuck. But you can always twist them a bit. Sights can wobble a bit, but you can just put an elastic band on them to hold them across. I mean, a lot of the opinions on the L1A1 in terms of pure accuracy come from people who shot utterly shagged out ones in the 80s in the British Army.
I mean, the same people that nowadays swear they're laser beams.
Oh yes. Rob of British Muzzleloaders sent me someone claiming that he was shooting 5-inch groups at 300 metres with one. At which point, he's claiming he's capable of shooting a possible on a target rifle 300-yard target. Like, no. It's interesting. And then the thing I did with Henry of Ninehole was these sort of servicemen's memories getting warped over time. What seems to be quite common is people misremembering distances. So you get a group size at 25 metres being claimed as being at 100, and a group size at 100 being claimed as being at 300. And I think that's what went on there.
Yeah.
Because let's just say that 5 inches at 300 metres is an exceptional group to shoot with a heavy barrel target rifle and a sling and target sights. I mean, you could shoot the highest possible score on the target rifle targets with them.
Mm. And last question, Brett Tickle. Should you zero your rifle from the bench, or say something more natural like from supported prone position?
You should zero your rifle in the position you're most likely to use it in, or in which you're going to expect the greatest accuracy. So if you're likely to shoot it prone most, zero it prone, and then learn for all the other positions you're likely to use it in, if you have to hold off, and if so, by how much. If you zero it off a bench, but you're not going to shoot it off a bench in practice, you're going to have to, if you're shooting well enough to be able to see what's going on, you're going to have to know an adjustment or a hold off for every single other position. I tend to follow the British Army doctrine of zeroing prone supported unless it's something I'm going to shoot exclusively off a sling, when I'll zero it the way I'm going to shoot it off a sling, or similar. I think you should understand that you will have a different point of aim in different stances due to the way your body reacts to recoil as the bullet's going down the barrel, and contrary to far too popular belief. And again, something I've got 2 videos on recoil theory that I've been planning for years, and I've got some footage from Taff Mouse and everything. I asked him like 2.5 years ago and I've got it, and I've just been waiting for the mental energy and knowing that I'm going to get hate in the comments from people who think that Newton's third law switches on when the bullet leaves the barrel, when it doesn't. But I mean,
I'm shocked.
As soon as you've got a force applied in both directions, both things are moving, and you can't react to the rifle moving. So you have to have good natural alignment, not snatch the trigger and so on. But it will in any case be different depending on how tight you're holding it, what position you're in. So you need to learn that. And I've seen CSR shooters in the UK write their sight settings down for all the different ranges they shoot at and in various positions. And
yep.
So have a range card on the butt of their rifle that they can look at. So okay, I'm 300, I'm kneeling, so I need to dial in this. And then we're going to prone, so I need to, but at the same distance, so I need to change it to that. And they have it all set out on a card like that, and then they can just dial it in. Because they're using scopes with target turrets, so you can dial a setting. Mm. But, I hope that answers the question.
All right.
So
that was it.
That was it. That was ages. And then you might have spotted a jump cut in the middle where the camera died without giving us any warning. Full battery, full battery, full battery, switch off. So Anyway, thank you so much for watching us eat fondue and drink wine.
And yeah, certainly thank you for your patience, because this has gone on for a while.
If you watched this far, well done. I mean, this is perfect for downloading just the audio and having it as a podcast on a long drive, or if you need to get to sleep and you have a massive insomnia problem that drugs don't fix. We can
sort it out.
We can bore you for Britain. So, thank you so much. That's our first 100,000. Onwards and upwards.
Mm-hmm.
And we shall see how we progress in the future. And I'd just like to say that this is the first time we're using, in anger, a Zoom H6 and a pair of Wi-Fi
No wires.
microphones. And we're being a bit lazy. We're just clipping the boxes on because we get excellent sound quality. There's less chances of something going wrong. When I had Dale over, I lost the audio from one of the mics. It just started generating pops. One of the mics died. One of the clip-on mics, which was a bit of a disaster.
Yeah.
So we ended up with echoey audio off the backup on the camera. So we've got a Zoom H6, so we've got perfectly synced up audio without having to faff. We just clip these on ourselves. Doesn't matter that they're visible, really.
Nope.
You can use them with a plug-in mic, but this seems simpler. And thank you so much for your support. We have acquired lots of interesting gats with your funding that we will show progressively over time.
Of course, yes.
And yeah, like and subscribe. Non-patrons who've survived this far, please consider becoming patrons. And
see you next time.
bye.